Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this 8th edition of the Just Transition Platform Conference. It's organized by the European Commission Directorates General for Regional and Urban Policy and Energy, DG Regio and DG ENER. It's wonderful to see so many people of you here, a really packed crowd with hardly any seats free. And I know that hundreds of people are also following online, so I give you a warm welcome, especially to those of you following remotely. My name is Aminda Lee. I'm a British-Italian journalist, ex-BBC, and I'm a professional moderator. I specialize in environmental topics and climate change and the circular economy, so I'm well aware of the vital importance of achieving a just transition for all regions as part of efforts under the European Green Deal to have net zero carbon emissions by 2050. You must excuse me, it's very hot under these lights, so I'm perspiring a bit, but it will soon stop. So I am going to be facilitating your discussions here this morning and also later on this afternoon. It's a packed program ahead over the next couple of days, but before we start, as usual, we've got to have some housekeeping and we're going to have some practical points on the slides you can see behind me. So, for those of you here in the room, you can connect to Wi-Fi. The network is Tanners, and the password is WinePalace1902. Don't know if we'll be drinking that much wine at the moment, but at least we've got wine in the password. Since there are many people also watching from many regions who don't necessarily speak English, we also have interpretation. So we've got it in English, Czech, German, Greek, Polish, Spanish, and Ukrainian. And the interpretation codes, you can download Interactio, which is the app. Many of you have probably already done this already. You can use the QR code, and there's a version for Apple and for Android. And you can then, when you've downloaded it, you can then use the codes, and it depends where you are. For those of you here in the room, the code to enter and listen to the interpretation is JTP23. And for those of you watching online, it's JTP23 online, which makes sense. When we come to questions and answers, those of the audience here in Brussels, please put up your hands and I'll send a microphone to you. For those of you who are watching online, please do just send your questions in on the chat. There's a Q&A function on the swap card platform, and it's nice and easy. And we've got Margarita here, who's going to be monitoring the questions, and she's going to be the voice of the online audience in our sessions today. Thank you, Margarita. So, obviously, we like to also spread things away from outside this room. We've got a lot of people here and a lot of people watching online, but we want to spread it to the wider world too. So if you want to send things on social media, the things that you've heard here today, please use the hashtag #JustTransitionPlatform. Nice and easy. Since we also want to hear your opinions today, we're going to be using Slido to run some polls. And if we can have the next slide, that's the information on Slido, because we're going to be running some polls in this session. Here's the QR code for that. Don't get confused with the Interactio one. And those of you also watching on the platform, you can also answer our polls as well. We want it to be as inclusive an experience as possible for everyone. Once you've got to Slido, the code to join the event is JTP23, and that's the same whether you're online or in the room. So that's all hopefully nice and simple for you. And I can see everyone with cameras up trying to get their QR codes. Good, because we're going to be running a poll in 1 second or so. So I'd like you to get your fingers on the buzzers and ready to log in and to answer the question. The question is not difficult because I want to try and find out what kinds of regions we've got represented here today. It's a bit of a warm-up. It's nothing particularly serious, but it's just to get an idea of who's in the room and who's watching online. So here's our first poll of the day, and I can see some people have already logged in. Excellent, thank you. And the question is, what kind of region or community do you represent? So we're going to leave that running for a while. We can see that on the screen. We've already had 39 people voting, so that's great, thank you. You're obviously a very high-tech audience. That's good to see. I'm going to leave that running for a few moments. So 6 months have passed since the last JTP conference in April, and as you all know, we are well into the implementation phase of the Territorial Just Transition plans. Territories with extractive industries and related energy production, and those with carbon-intensive industries are now working to restructure and diversify their economy, maintain social cohesion, and retrain the affected workers and youth to prepare them for the future today. Now, I'm going to close the poll now. We've just hit 100. That's great. That's very good. And as we can see from the results, we've got 57% of people who are representing coal or lignite regions. Then we've got other, 24%. That could be many things. And then we've got carbon, energy-intensive sectors. Oh, I can see people are still voting here. So obviously, we've got quite a mixed community, but obviously dominated at the moment by coal and lignite as well. But all of the regions are facing different challenges, as you all very well know. Now, this stakeholder conference aims to hear how the process is going from your side. We want to know how the implementation is going. What's going well? What challenges have emerged so far, and how have you managed to solve them? Have you managed to solve them? What best practices and good ideas can you share with the audience today, here and online? What lessons can we learn? And what other support do you need from the European Commission? Over the next few days, there will be opportunities to discuss all these matters and more, and to pool your insights to achieve a just transition and collective prosperity in every region in Europe. I'd now like to get a feel for how this process is actually going. We know it's still early days, but let's see how it's going, and I'd like to run a second poll, and here we are. Polls are being run behind, carrying on, so at least we're getting plenty of answers. So how do you think the implementation of Just Transition is going in your region? Well, it's nice to see quite smoothly. Number one on 39% so far. I'm going to leave this poll a little bit. Not very smoothly. Okay, we understand there are bumps on the road. It's very easy to, have problems on the way and not quite know how to solve them. That's one of the reasons why we have these conferences, so you can talk to each other and you can share your experiences. Not smoothly at all. Well, hopefully we'll be hearing from some of those and finding out what the problems are, and seeing if anybody else in the room or in other regions maybe have some good ideas to help you make that smoother. It's not started yet. Okay, we know that some regions are a bit delayed and a bit behind, so that's round about the amount we would have expected on that. And very smoothly, only 4%. All right, well, hopefully by the time the next 6 months comes along, that very smoothly will be the number one. Just let me write those figures down, because we'll be referring to them later. And we've got 107 votes, so that's good, thank you. Right, 29% and 14%. Okay, these things do always change. It's difficult when you're trying to write figures down and they're changing in front of your eyes. Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to close that poll. And hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at the upcoming program, but I do want to mention a couple of highlights to you. Later on today, we're going to be discussing examples of good practice in harnessing the financing opportunities offered by the Just Transition mechanism, and I know that's obviously very important. And there is an incredibly valuable opportunity for all of you here in the room and also online to put your questions to the European Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms, Elisa Ferreira. And that's a wonderful opportunity. We're going to have an hour-long session, so you can already start thinking of the questions that you would like to put to her now. There's also going to be sessions on topics such as empowering vulnerable and unrepresented groups, the importance of effective communication, the role of universities in supporting and facilitating a just transition at the regional level, and the opportunities offered by long-term energy storage, as well as financial technical assistance available on the ground. Before I move on to explain how this opening session is going to work, let's close the voting on that poll. Okay, and we'll do the next one, because I want to kind of understand what the biggest achievement has been that you feel you've made so far in your region. So, is it, well, you've got the various options there, and people are already starting to vote. You're obviously getting really into the swing of this. So is it setting ambitious decarbonisation timelines and targets? Is it raising awareness and overcoming social resistance? Is it meaningful involvement of the stakeholders in planning and implementation of the TJTPs? Is it leveraging opportunities to boost employment and diversify regional economy? Well, we've got meaningful involvement of all stakeholders of planning and implementation at the moment in the lead, though it's being closely chased by setting ambitious decarbonisation timelines and targets. Let's see how that race goes. It's interesting because, of course, you all really know each other. You've been meeting for quite a long time. You've created a community. And so it's not really a surprise that meaningful involvement of all stakeholders is the number one thing that you feel that you have achieved so far, because it is a remarkable achievement to get everybody involved. I'll let you keep voting on that. And while you're voting, let's remember that in the end, this is all about people. People. It's about shared opportunities. It's about equal opportunities. It's about quality jobs. It's where everybody and everyone is involved in the transition and no region is left behind. And we're already moving in that direction. And the path, while it is long and the road stretches ahead, we've actually made achievements so far, as you can see here as well. I'm going to close that poll now. We've had 88 people voting, and we've still got the meaningful involvement as number one. So that's number one. And then we've got the ambitious targets. That was not easy. I'm sure you will remember how difficult that was. Then leveraging opportunities, and then raising awareness. That's the fourth one. Okay, right, I've made a note of those. Thank you very much. Now, we know it's not easy. We know this path is not smooth and that you've had challenges on the way, and there are still challenges and there will be. But we want to know what the biggest one has been so far. And so I would like to actually go to the next poll, which is the biggest, what is the biggest challenge you've faced so far? I have an idea of what might be first, but let's see. Always when you only have two people voting, it looks quite dramatic with the 50-50, and then it gets better as more people start voting. Lack of awareness, that's winning so far. Oh, and yes, I had a feeling this was going to jump around, and the technical expertise and administrative capacity could be an issue. Yeah, I'm actually surprised about the second one so far, that's not further up, because we've been hearing that people have been having problems and are facing, let's say, challenges on being able to spend the money on the projects in the timescale. So it's interesting to see that while that may have felt like a very big problem, it's perhaps not the main one. We'll keep this open for a couple of minutes, and while you're finishing voting on that, I'll tell you how the rest of this session is going to work. So we're going to be running a panel discussion, but we're going to start by having a video message from the Commission's Executive Vice President, Maroš Šefčovič, and a keynote speech from DG Regio's Director General, Themis Christophidou. That will be followed by a roundtable discussion with panelists representing different viewpoints on the just transition, with experience on the ground, the youth perspective, a trade union opinion, and an academic overview, along with a representation from the Commission. Before that, let's now close our poll and see what challenges you have decided are the biggest ones from your point of view. So the winner is the lack of administrative capacity. Then we have the capacity to allocate the funding within the expected deadlines. Then we have lack of awareness of the just transition among citizen and stakeholder groups. Okay, and then underneath, meaningful stakeholder engagement. And that's interesting because that reflects the poll that we saw before, that you all are actually feeling engaged and involved. So that's a double, let's say, emphasis that you are actually all feeling involved and engaged. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much for that poll. And now I'm going to move to actually start hearing from some of our guests and from the actual people who will be taking part in the program. So, and as we see here, I'd like to now introduce a short video message from Executive Vice President Maroš Šefčovič, who has recently been placed in charge of the European Green Deal, of which the just transition is a vital part. Let's hear what he has to say.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be part of the Just Transition Platform Conference again, and for the first time since I took over on my additional role overseeing the European Green Deal. The platform is close to my heart, as it is building on the Coal Regions in Transition initiative that I launched back in 2017. It has now become the main meeting place for stakeholders from all the regions supported by the Just Transition Fund, covering not just fossil fuel dependent areas, but also those reliant on the high emission and carbon intensive industries. So it gives me a great satisfaction to see how this project has grown into a key part of our common work towards a green transition that is fair and socially just, and that one which leaves no one and nowhere behind. To achieve this requires the decarbonizing and diversifying of local economies, improving their resilience and ensuring high-quality jobs. The Just Transition Fund and the Just Transition Mechanism are tools tailor-made to support the workers and communities most affected by the transition. Today you will discuss the implementation across almost 100 Just Transition territories in the EU. And you can rest assured that we will listen carefully to your experiences, ready to respond concretely to the challenges that you face. The lessons drawn from these discussions will help us to implement the Social Climate Fund, which, starting in 2026, will provide up to 65 billion euros to finance direct income support for vulnerable households and to support measures to reduce emissions in the road transport and building sector. We know that the future of the EU will be fossil-free, not least because the growing deployment of renewable energy is making fossil fuels like coal less economically efficient. Last winter, coal and gas generation fell significantly compared to the previous year. In May this year, wind and solar produce more electricity than all fossil fuels together. But if we are to achieve our ambitious targets for 2030, we must accelerate this trend, and your regions will be pivotal for that. Not only because we must ensure this process is fair for all workers and communities, but also because carbon-intensive regions are home to the industries that deliver critical materials needed for the green transition, like steel, cement, or chemicals. And coal regions are well placed to become clean energy powerhouses as they have the right knowledge, skills, and grid infrastructure. To explore this potential, later today there will be a dedicated session on energy storage which could enhance the uptake of renewables in the regions. Tackling energy poverty is another important part of a just transition, so I'm glad to see that there will be a session tomorrow on empowering the most vulnerable stakeholders in this context. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand very well the crucial role regions play in Europe's economy and our societies, and I know that things can look very different on the ground. That is why events such as these are so crucial, to bring everyone together so we can exchange, discuss, learn from each other. You have shown the way with the preparation of your territorial just transition plans, outlining investment needs based on the special characteristics of each region. We now count on your continued support and engagement to make a success of the Just Transition Fund. We believe the place-based approach is the way to go, both now and in the future, to ensure the green transition succeeds. Because if it does not succeed fairly, it does not succeed at all. Thank you.
I think you'll agree that was very encouraging to hear the acknowledgement of your region's pivotal role in creating a fossil-free Europe. And for your information, the session on energy storage will be later this afternoon at 4:15, whereas the discussions on empowering vulnerable groups will be at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, while all these processes need to be accelerated, the good news is that you're not alone. You can learn from each other, and also you can count on the assistance of the European Commission. To tell us more about that, I'd now like to introduce our keynote speaker, Themis Christophidou. She is Director General of the Regional and Urban Policy, a role she has just recently taken up after a 5-year term as Director General at Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, though she has been at DG Regio in the past. In her keynote speech, she's going to take stock of progress made so far. For those of you in the room, please give her a warm welcome.
Morning to everyone. Welcome to the Just Transition Platform Conference. I'm a bit shorter than you. I'm really delighted to be here today for the first time, although you're meeting, I think, for the 8th time. So this is my first, and I hope there will be many more. I'm delighted to be amongst the people who help make the transformation that local economies experience in this twin transition more just and fair for everyone. Through the Just Transition Fund and the platform, what you're doing is truly inspiring. From Estonia to Portugal, you're training kids in coding and adults in engineering. You're greening cities, greening buildings, and creating new cultural centers. And you're creating jobs in new sectors and new products, from plastics to programming, from batteries to cosmetics, from magnets to medicine. The vibrant communities which grew up around coal mining and heavy industry have a new lease of life, because you are taking their skills, those that made the minds and machines, and you're repurposing and reskilling them for the new green and digital economy. It is true when they say about the Just Transition Fund, this is Europe at its best. because you embody two key values of Europe. That on the one hand, we are forward-looking and open, and on the other hand, that we move together in solidarity. You're helping deliver a clean and green transition in a way that leaves no place behind and no European feeling forgotten. As we just heard from Vice President Šefčovič, if the transition does not succeed fairly, it does not succeed at all. But of course, the success of the Just Transition Fund now depends on the actual implementation of projects. So today my message is simple and clear, I hope. Implementation must accelerate. Your ideas and your plans are excellent, but let us now put them into practice. We realize the pressure you're under, and I also watched one after the other the replies to the survey, which were very telling. And I think we know the challenges you're facing. But let us work together to identify the obstacles and bottlenecks, and then overcome them and resolve them. And this is starting to happen. Our latest figures show clearly that project selection is picking up in many countries. Let's how we can learn from this trend and accelerate it. We're doing all we can to support you. And if you need us to do more, we will do more. First, we reply to any of your questions, including inquiries on state aid. Second, there are a number of tools that can be of service. You know them well: JASPERS, the technical support instrument, and the specific assistance to coal regions. Please make full use of them. Third, in the new STEP proposal, the Commission's new impetus for strategic technologies, we have proposed a pre-financing of 30% for Just Transition Fund resources. If Council and Parliament adopt our proposal this year, it will ease a lot the pressure of funding and of early spending. And of course, there is an extra fourth form of support, the Just Transition Platform, which brings us together today. We plan to continue and even expand this support. Through this conference, these past 3 years, you have shared your concerns and your ideas for the projects you're running. The seeds of cooperation have been planted, and we will nurture them by bringing you and your valuable know-how together. In the coming years, we will increase our support on the ground. We have recently put in place an army of Just Transition experts, and this army is now at your disposal. Through several streams of assistance, such as JTP Groundwork and JT Peers, we offer hands-on support to authorities and to local stakeholders. Our goal is to deal with whatever specific challenges you have. From the north of Sweden to the heart of Romania, I hear that this support is unblocking issues that had been holding back projects. In 2024, we will launch new calls for support for JTP Groundwork and JT Peers, and I do encourage you to start preparing for your bids already. So, this is our work today. It was Albert Einstein who said that the world as we have made it is a product of our thinking. So, to change the world, we must change our thinking. And this is what you're doing, changing our thinking about whether all carbon-intensive regions can learn new skills, changing our thinking about what is possible in a fossil-free Europe, and changing our thinking about how fast we can make this change, meeting the targets that we as Europeans have set for ourselves. What you're doing here is unique, and let us find ways to accelerate it. I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas and your experiences. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Director General. It is genuinely exciting to hear that there are already so many positive examples in the regions. But the message that I think is already coming across loud and clear is the need to accelerate. But how can we speed up things? Some of you probably already think you're going faster than you ever imagined. How can we speed things up? Well, that starts by understanding how the just transition is currently being delivered on the ground, what barriers are to be overcome, and how. We'll be discussing these topics and more in the roundtable discussion coming up in a moment. Before I introduce our speakers and ask them to come up on stage, I'm going to run 2 quick polls. So we could have poll number 5. We're back on Slido again. So if we could see the poll, this is how you can join Slido if you've just joined us and you've not actually logged in already. And if we could run poll number 5, please. And the question is, what effect will the transition have on social cohesion in your region in the short term? And the way that I'm saying short term makes you think that there will be a question about long term afterwards. But let's look at the short term right now. And we go from positive to negative, and we'll see, well, okay, we've got quite negative, the moment winning out. On a par with quite positive. This is quite interesting. Negative is still winning out, though. We've had 54 people voting. Please do carry on voting. And while I leave that open, I'm going to introduce our roundtable panelists. So I'm going to move out of the way so that they can come up on stage. And joining me on stage, we have Thomas Pellerin-Karin, who is Director of the European Programme at the Institute for Climate Economics, giving us an academic perspective. We'll be hearing how implementation is going. Please sit down. We'll be hearing how implementation is going on the ground from Peter Dermol, the Mayor of Velje, home to Slovenia's last coal mine. We have Joanna Jakubowska, who is Just Transition Policy Officer at CEE Bankwatch Network. She's going to be giving us the perspective of NGOs and young people. Then we're going to be hearing the social and trade union viewpoint from Florian Marin, who is a member of the European and Economic and Social Committee. And last but not least, we have the European Commission being represented by Catherine Wendt, who is Head of Unit for Smart and Sustainable Growth at DG Regio. Okay, I'm now going to stop this poll. And you can also see it in front of you, so you don't have to crick your neck. So quite negative. In a way, that's not a surprise, because you're going through massive change. Let's see long term. Let's run the next question, and it is, what effect will the transition have on social cohesion in your region in the long term? Let's see if you think that it's going to be any different. We've got the same answers again, and I'm going to sit down while you carry on answering them. Oh, here we've got very positive on the top. That was, oh, okay, no, it's already moving. But hopefully, yes, we've got the positives winning out so far, which is positive. We can say. I'm going to leave the voting open for a few moments, just to get quite a few answers in there. We've got 65. Oh, in fact, I don't need to crick my neck either. I keep forgetting we have a screen here. Okay, quite positive. That's very good, actually. Okay. So, what we're going to do while you're finishing off voting that poll, I'll tell you how this session is going to work. We're going to get some reaction to the poll results from our speakers, and then I'm going to hear a few opening statements and questions from them, and then we're going to open the floor for your questions. Those of you here in the room, put your hand up and I'll send you a microphone. Those of you who are online, you can already start sending in questions now if you want, via the Q&A chat on Swapcard. And we have Margarita here, who is ready to be your voice and to put your question to the panelists. Ideally, we would like you to tell us who you are and the kind of region that you represent, so we can get the context of your question. And ideally, also who your question is for. I know that people often say all panelists, but sometimes it's quite nice to actually focus on someone in particular, because of course we have different perspectives with us today. So I think I'm now going to close that poll. We've had 88 people voting, and quite positive. So that's interesting to see that at the moment you're suffering and it's difficult and it's quite negative, but you're looking and you're projecting that the transition will have a quite positive effect on social cohesion in your region in the long term. So thank you very much for that. And what I would like to do is I'd like to get our speakers' reactions to these polls that we've had so far. Can I start with you, Mayor, because you're from the ground. You don't have to press any buttons. You can just talk straight into the microphone. And just a reminder to everyone, because we have interpretation, let's try and talk slowly to help everybody communicate with each other. Okay, what do you think about the polls from your experience on the ground in your city? What do you think of the answers?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I think that these green voters are coming from Slovenia, and I'm sure that because, yes, also in Velenje, when we heard a few years ago that we will go and close down the coal mine, of course, people were in shock. And after that, we start to communicate with them, with different stakeholders. And yes, I agree with it. In the short term is, of course, very difficult question. This for also for the citizens, miners, the local community, the states, also for the European community. But in the long term, of course, there is a lot of opportunities. And in Velenje, we see this opportunity. And of course, we want to catch them.
Florian, from a trade union perspective, there's also microphones there.
Well, I think that it is important to mention that, and the polls are very explicit in this regard, that the Just Transition Platform should deliver economic but also social opportunities when they are needed, meaning when those mines will be closed. Otherwise, we will fuel the pessimism, and the European project will be affected negatively. So we have to take into account that it's also a problem of dynamic of the absorption. Having money is not necessarily everything. We need to convert those money into concrete actions, and to convert those money to concrete opportunities when they are needed for those regions, in order to fuel the optimistic way of transforming those regions. Thank you so much.
Joanna, from a youth perspective and also from NGOs, anything that surprised you or struck you?
Yes, to be honest, the answers regarding the biggest achievements, it wasn't that it was surprising, but I would be a bit more skeptical about the involvement of stakeholders in the just transition process. And from the perspective of the youth, but also other vulnerable groups, as for example women, we see that the regions, the just transition regions, still unfortunately fall shortly when it comes to the involvement of those groups. So I would be a bit skeptical when it comes to involvement of stakeholders here. Of course, we've made some improvement here, but when it comes to involvement of all stakeholders and those that are not so obviously impacted by the transition, they're still left aside, unfortunately. So I'll prove it later on in my intervention regarding the youth, but that's the first comment.
Very interesting, actually, because yes, we were all being very positive that we're all working together, and now you're saying, oh, well, hang on a minute. So, okay. Thomas?
Hi, everyone. I'm actually positively surprised by the results, especially on the two last questions, and it echoes a saying that we attribute to Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian philosopher from the previous century, who said that what we need to do is to articulate two things. We need to articulate the pessimism of intelligence with the optimism of the will. And indeed, if as smart people we are looking at the energy and the climate transition that is happening now, you need to have some degree of pessimism because a lot of jobs are being destroyed. We talk a lot about coal miners, but really the big wave when it comes to the number of people are the people that are in the diesel industry. People that work on diesel engines, hundreds of thousands of people who will see their market disappear, are seeing their market disappear as a result of the transition. So we need to have that healthy degree of intelligent pessimism. Otherwise, we have a bad diagnosis, and if you have a bad diagnosis, you can't really treat the problem that is in front of you. But obviously, we also need the optimism of the will. There are millions and millions of jobs to be creating, including in the green economy, building factories that can produce heat pumps, electrolyzers, batteries, etc. All of them that can be quality jobs that deliver a good quality work for Europeans. And if we look globally, there are a few sectors, such as heat pumps, where we Europeans can try and achieve to be actually the global leader, where we can be actually number one, ahead of China, ahead of the US, with all the geopolitical, social, and economic benefits.
You can tell us more about those in a moment. Catherine, before we forget the polls, what did you think about the results? Was there anything that stood out for you?
There are two of the results which particularly spoke to me. The first one was on the stakeholder involvement, and I hear very well what Joanna said in terms of possible skepticism about the level of engagement, but nonetheless, I think it's a huge achievement. There's a result which says that 40% feel that this is the biggest positive achievement so far of the implementation of the Just Transition Fund, because for us it was the partnership principle was extremely important both in the programming of the territorial Just Transition plans and during the implementation. So whether it's 40 or 35 or a bit lower, but still the fact that this is recognized by so many people for me is a very positive result. The second one which spoke to me was the identification of lack of capacity and expertise. 45% of respondents identified this as an issue, and I think this is, of course, why we're here today, why the Just Transition platform has been established, and we hope that through this community we can keep on contributing and helping address this really this big issue, which, of course, we knew existed, and we saw it confirmed today in the poll.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks to everyone for voting on those polls. We will have a couple more coming up later on. But now, Thomas, I'd like to start with you because I think you can give us from an academic point of view, a good overview of how the Just Transition is going so far. How is it going?
I guess I'd like to start by reminding ourselves that this is not the first transition we have in our economy. For more than 2 centuries, we've been having drastic transformation in our economy. The ones that were the hardest from a social justice perspective were the ones that were not anticipated. So therefore, to me, one key element to have a just transition is anticipation. And therefore, try to see what's going to be our European economy, our regional economies in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and see what we can do now to mitigate the negative consequences and maximize the positive consequences. What we've seen in the energy sector over the last 2 years is what happens when you do not anticipate. Europe failed to anticipate the fossil gas shock that we had in the summer of 2021. There was some degree of anticipation. That's why we avoided a shortage of gas and electricity in Europe. But the anticipation was insufficient in order to avoid the most catastrophic economic and social impacts of that. And so since 2021, we've seen a lot of factories struggling. We've seen a lot of workers being out of a job because of the high fossil fuel cost. We've seen also a lot of households struggling. And we also saw all our member states engaging in a quite disorganized manner in what seems to be the largest fossil fuel subsidy spending spree in European history. According to Bruegel, all the money that has been spent to face the fossil fuel shock, if you sum this, you get to a figure of 600 billion euros. Just put that into perspective with the Social Climate Fund. Like Social Climate Fund, 60 billion euros over 7 years. Here we're talking about 600 billion euros of national public money over the last 2 years, just to try to overcome the fossil fuel shock. When we look at where we are going, where the EU is going, the EU is trying to do the green transition through 3 main tools. Number 1 is carbon pricing. Number 2 is regulation. Number 3 is public finance. And if we look at those tools, we already see a lot of long-term signals that are sent by the European Union. Let's take them one by one. On carbon price, the EU adopted the most ambitious carbon pricing system in the world, and dare I say, in human history. Over the last 5 years, in Europe, we saw the carbon price quadruple, going from around 20 euros to around 80 euros per ton. But we also see a decision to quadruple the coverage. Today, only the electricity sector really pays the carbon price. At around 2027, we will see part of the industry start paying a carbon price with a phase out of free allowances. We will see also households and SMEs paying a carbon price for road transportation and buildings. So you see already that big carbon price coming in. It will hit the European economy in 2027, and therefore we must anticipate. So what's the plan to make sure that when that carbon price is being introduced in Europe, it doesn't lead to more energy poverty, it does not lead to more SMEs struggling. Second thing, regulation. Many regulations of the Fit for 55 package are far-reaching. One of them, maybe the most far-reaching example we have, is the end of the internal combustion engine technology. That technology that we use to power cars with petrol, gasoline or diesel, has been the backbone of the European mobility system over the last 100 years. And it is now, legally dead from 2035 onwards. The question is can we anticipate all the jobs transformation that are happening? And as it was said by a previous speaker, by Florian, getting the timing right. Making sure that when diesel jobs are disappearing in a given region, you have other jobs coming in. For instance, in batteries. I'm coming from France. In the north of France, actually 100% of the batteries that will be produced in France will be produced in the top of the country, close to Belgium, which used to be actually a coal mining area not that long ago. But this requires anticipation, this requires planning, this requires action now with a long-term view. Finally, the last lever, public finance. On public finance, we do not have the kind of long-term certainty offered by the EU. At least we don't have it yet. For now, we have the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and we know the money that will be there until 2026. For the EU budget, we know until 2027. And yes, one exception to that is the Social Climate Fund, where we know until 2032. So we know that on average, the Social Climate Fund will give an amount of money that is around 2 euros per month per European, which, if targeted well, can be transformative, but will not suffice. So we see that kind of conundrum. When we look at carbon pricing and regulation, the EU sends very clear signals for the second half of this decade and for 2030, 2035. That's great. That's super useful. We need actually the EU to also do the same when it comes to public finance. And that's why I believe that we need to start debating now, 8 months ahead of the elections, about what should an EU long-term climate investment plan look like. As long as we don't have that, then we will have a missing arrow in our quiver. There will be a missing tool in our toolbox. And we need to discuss this now, because I really fear what's going to happen in 2026, 2027. The moment where the EU stick will stiffen, the moment where EU regulations will have an impact on the real economy because they will be implemented, the moment where ETS2 will increase the cost of gas heating and petrol and diesel for households, happens to also be the moment where the Recovery and Resilience Facility fades away. And that's not a good policy mix. You want to have a big stick and a big carrot at the same time, and you don't want your stick to get bigger at the same time as your carrot gets smaller. And therefore, we need to talk about quantity of money, but also about quality of public spending to deliver the kind of transformation in our economy that Europeans want.
Thank you. That was very clear, particularly the image of the carrot and the stick getting smaller and bigger. Yes, quite. Well, in fact, yes, please do pass the microphone on to our Mayor, Peter Dermol, because I'd like to hear how the Just Transition is going on the ground in your city, which is the last working coal mine in Slovenia. What's happening there?
Yes, at the moment we are waiting for the first tender from the state, but in the past, of course, we are preparing the strategic coal phase out by 2033. The bad topics of this strategic plans was that they don't give a lot of attention for the social security of the miners. But okay, this is the reason why I was a little bit disappointed. But okay, after that we are preparing the regional plans. And in the past year, of course, we are established the Just Transition Center. So in the middle of this time, we are preparing with all the stakeholders the strategic important projects. I think that common value of this project was around 1 billion and 1.3 billion euros. And of course, also the municipality of Valenia is starting to prepare project documentation for different projects. So we want to establish the new business zone. We want to build the incubator for the technical incubator for the young businesses, and to establish the new center of the future. This is the main project, and the other project, or the last project, which is very, very important for us, is to make a green transition of district heating system, which is now phasing, which we have, where we have 3 phases. One phase is how to reduce the heating consumption. This means that we want to renovate all of our buildings inside the Valenia. The second, how to reduce the losses inside of the district heating networks. And we know that we must renovate around 10 kilometers of the district heating networks with heating insulation or thermal insulation. And in the end, of course, we need new green renewable sources. At the moment, we supply and produce the heat from the coal, and of course, in the future, we want to go to the green sources. And this is the focus which we have at the moment.
You're fighting on quite a number of fronts then, not just on the coal mine, but on many other fronts as part of this.
Yes, now it's our idea that we have a diverse sources, and we are talking about the small hydropower plant, we are talking about the heating pumps, solar power plant or heating plant, and also with the thermal power plant, where today burn the coal, preparing the strategic plans, what could be the source for the winter period. So we want to have some strong sources for this period, and I hope that we in next few months will find some solutions also with the thermal power plant in Shostan in this way.
Thank you very much indeed. And now, we've already heard from Joanna a little bit, saying that while it's all very wonderful that the stakeholders are involved, more needs to be done from the youth perspective to get people involved. Can you tell us a little bit more about, let's say, how much progress has been made so far and what else we need to do?
So in the context of the just transition process, maybe I will just actually give a background of what we do at Bankwatch, because this is, I think, absolutely crucial here. So Bankwatch Network, for those of you that are not aware of what we do, we are a network of organizations all across Central and Eastern Europe. And we have organizations that are based in all of the just transition regions in this region. Of Central and Eastern Europe. So our biggest added value is the fact that we have a very rooted on the ground knowledge of what is happening there. And that is why also we have a clear overview of the situation of not only, let's say, usual stakeholders that are involved in the process, in the just transition process, but also those that would like to be involved, but are not necessarily being heard properly and are still a bit put on the side. So here, of course, the youth comes into place. So we've been looking at the just transition process from the very beginning when the fund was established. And during the programming phase, so the phase when territorial just transition plans were drafted, we decided to analyze together with Generation Climate Europe how the youth has been actually involved in drafting of those plans. And we conducted plenty of interviews, talked to the youth on the ground, NGOs, and so on. And out of 15 countries that we analyzed, 11 of them have some forms of engagement of the youth. So it's not that bad. 11 out of 15 could be worse, could be better. But in terms of some forms of engagement, it means that very often the youth was involved, unfortunately, in the very last stage of the preparation of the plans. So they could comment on them, but when the documents were already over there. So unfortunately, they weren't involved at the very beginning. So this is one of the main conclusions from this report. Another is that in those places where the involvement of the youth was successful, usually those places were with a very active involvement of civil society organizations. So if civil society organizations in those specific regions were active, they were also able to empower youth on the ground and also mobilize them to for example, prepare comments for the plans. One of my favorite case study from this report is in Estonia, which proved to be one of the most inspiring, I would say, countries all across Europe, to be honest, in terms of involvement of the youth in the just transition process. So the case study is that the ministry actually cooperated with the local NGO. And together they created a citizen assembly. So randomly chosen group of young people were given a chance to provide feedback, comments, all of their reflections basically that were later on taken into account to the final just transition plan. So this is an amazing example, and also a follow-up story to this one, because I recently talked to our campaigner from Estonia, and apparently out of the citizen assembly, those participants, those young people that were the most active, created also an NGO. So this is absolutely the best possible best practice that I would definitely like to underline here. But there are also places where, of course, the involvement wasn't that successful. And what struck me a lot, because I'm very much used to this narrative that Eastern Europe is lagging behind on many levels. Actually, in our report, we clearly saw that in places such as, for example, France, Italy, or Luxembourg, there was no involvement of youth at all in the preparation of those plans. So again, it very much varies from one country to another, from one region to another, but we see that that unfortunately the preparatory phase was not that successful in many places when it comes to involvement of the youth. And just quickly, also because now we are talking about the implementation phase, so this is where we are currently. And it's a bit of a more, I would say, complex situation, because currently the most important role is for the implementation of Just Transition Fund is in hands of the monitoring committees. So we were very much hoping that in those monitoring committees, so in the room, in the groups where the final decisions on what kind of projects will be implemented, will also have the youth. And again, that's why my initial skeptical approach towards it, towards involvement of the youth, because recently, also based on publication made by Bankwatch, we see that the only countries in our region, so out of 7 countries that we cover in Eastern Europe, only Romania, Poland, and one more, and I forgot what was the other. I need to check my notes. But there was one more country, so 3 countries in the Eastern Europe that have the youth in the monitoring committees. So unfortunately, again, the room that should be filled with different stakeholders, no matter if they are directly impacted by the transition, indirectly or positively or negatively, they should be in the room to make sure that their voices are being heard regarding what kind of projects will be implemented by the JTF fund. So I'll leave here. And, yes.
It's good to hear that, let's say, okay, sometimes, I mean, it's too late to get youth involved in the planning phase, but certainly getting young people involved in the implementation phase is still possible. And it's interestingly good examples that you've given us already. Florian, I saw you nodding a number of points when Joanna was talking. And obviously the Just Transition involves everyone. And also from the point of view of jobs and society, are the plans social enough as far as you're concerned?
Thank you for this question, and thank you for all these interesting approaches. I will follow what Joanna already mentioned, meaning involvement of the civil society is important. And we have in the EU Urban Agenda, we have, for example, multi-level and multi-stakeholder approach, which can be translated also into implementation of the plans. But what I wanted to say is that at the European level, we have an instrument, which is Code of Conduct on Partnership, which is allowing the civil society to be involved in the programming, implementation, but also monitoring and control of the EU funds, of the projects which are being financed by EU funds. Well, I think that we should look very carefully on the synergy between European Code of Conduct on Partnership and how those monitoring committees are actually respecting this regulation. Why? Because if you are discussing about monitoring and control, well, this is another topic, and civil society should be there, and a lot of or enough transparency should be delivered in order to give enough space to civil society, also youth organization, trade unions, to react and to protect the entire process, if you allow me the term. Why? Why I'm saying this? And now I'm coming to your question. Well, the social acceptance of the transformative process needs further involvement from the civil society, not only from the civil society, but also. Why? Because if you are looking at for example, I'm representing workers from the mining sector in Romania. I'm also a trade union leader, but here I'm representing European Economic and Social Committee. And we have to discuss about the narrative which we are promoting, and we have to change a little bit the narrative. Why I'm saying this? Because if you ask a miner which has worked 30 years in a mine to say, look, you have to quit your job. Why? Because what you are doing is harmful for the others. And they are saying, okay, I have to quit my job, but why a doctor or, I don't know, an IT guy is not doing it? So the narrative should be changed in order to promote the fact that those workers are not alone. Those regions are not alone, that the European Commission and the European institutions are providing for them. Otherwise, like this, we will build enough social acceptance in order to support the transformative process. Because right now, what we are seeing in some member states is that the populists are using this situation in order to say, look, you are quitting your job because European Commission wants you to be poor, or things like that. So we should not allow this. And for this, building enough partnership with civil society in a very concrete level, and in a very concrete way, and the monitoring committees are a very good example. It was also a fight, I'm coming from Romania, to have the youth organization on board in the monitoring committee. It is hugely important. Now, linked to the plans, if there are social enough. It has been mentioned that it is important that the transformative process to be just. So for this, I think that it's not enough to build economical opportunities, okay, because we have money. But if you are looking at the quality and the dynamic of the absorption, well, this is another game. But if you are looking at the plans, for example, and you see that the link between the plans with the European pillars of social rights, for example. Well, it is a discussion which is, in some cases, and it is not an isolated situation, it is lacking this link, this synergy, and it should be strengthened in the future. If you are looking at the call for proposal level, because we are seeing that in some regions at the call for proposal level, we have some criteria. If you are looking at those criteria, and we have made some researches, how many of them are socially, they have social conditionalities? Well, this is another topic, because if you will create a job for 2 years or with 2 hours per day, well, this is not something which is creating a predictability, or is not creating the trust in the fact that the public institutions, the European Commission, it is doing enough for supporting the transformative process. So in order to have civil society on board, in order to build that social acceptance, well, all the plans, every state aid, every road, every contract should take into account the fact that we need social conditionalities in order to also to use local resources in the process, but also to build that social acceptance, which in some cases, again, it is lacking. I can continue for hours if you allow me, but I will leave you enough.
No, hours, I'm afraid not. We don't have time for hours. And in fact, in a couple of moments, we're going to be coming to your questions. So those of you here in the room, get ready to put your hands up. And those of you who are online, please do start sending them in. We've got Margarita, who's monitoring what's being sent in, and she'll be giving your questions to the floor here. Now, Catherine, from the European Commission point of view, gosh, there's been a lot of things discussed already, and I see you've been scribbling notes, so what's your reaction to what you've heard so far, and can you give us any good or positive news?
Thank you very much indeed. Very, very rich discussion. And I mean, firstly, of course, I couldn't agree more with Florian about the need for the social acceptance of the transition. And without this, of course, the process is immeasurably harder. And this is something that we've been, indeed, through the JTF, this is the objective of the JTF, to accompany the transition, to make sure that it is just. So this, for me, is absolutely essential. Now, I wanted to say a word on financing, because I do come from the European Commission, so this is what many people turn to us for. And Thomas made the point about the need for long-term planning and a long-term perspective. For a climate investment plan. I think, of course, this is way beyond my pay grade, and it's something which the political leaders need indeed to have a very serious discussion about. From the cohesion point of view, you can see that as the transition moves onwards, it will by definition create an impact on cohesion because there are asymmetric impacts on the regions. So from our point of view, it's just clear that we will continue and need to continue to be engaged in supporting this because the regions will be suffering different effects, will be dealing with different issues. And this is something which cohesion policy has been accompanying and working on for decades, and we will continue to be there. I think this is very, very clear. The other point I just wanted to pick up on was Joanna, you asked for news, Aminda, so indeed the importance of youth. I mentioned at the beginning the importance generally of stakeholder engagement for the youth, and I was very interested to hear about the different experiences across the different member states in Central and Eastern Europe. And the other member states. So just to say that we are setting up a youth task force as one of the JTP working groups from 2024 with the idea exactly that we can bring the experiences of youth together and have that exchange to allow youth to be more active, make a bigger contribution in the JTP, but of course also in the dialogue with their member states and their regions. So perhaps some of the good experience which you are seeing, we can spread it to some of the other member states about the engagement of youth. So please do watch on the JTP website for the opening of the applications, for the interest to participate in this, in the task force.
Thank you very much indeed. That's already something to make a note of, and something hopefully very positive that will also help to make sure that the voice of youth, but also other groups, are heard throughout the process. Right, now it's coming to time for your questions. So anyone in the room who would like to ask a question to our panelists, please put up your hands and I will send a microphone over to you. And also you're able to send questions in online as well. We have, there's a microphone here and one over here. There's people right at the back, there's a big screen and I can't really see you, so if you're behind that screen, stand up and wave and I'll be able to see you, okay? Please just briefly tell us who you are, where you represent and who your question's for. And please remember that questions are usually a short sentence with a question mark at the end. Thank you.
I'm Anna Bayomi, working for the Federation of Organizations Working with the Homeless in Brussels. I'm an energy poverty policy officer and I mostly follow EU directives and analyze whether they are inclusive enough towards vulnerable households. And I would like to ask a question regarding justice aspects of the transition and regarding coal users who are often vulnerable low-income households heating their homes with very polluting fuels. And they are highly represented in Central and Eastern European core regions. And I would like to ask whether they are included in the process and whether enough funding is distributed to them to renovate their homes, make them heat ready, and to heat with clean resources. So my question is about the participation and the distributive aspects towards coal users' households in your regions.
Thank you very much indeed, and we'll take the question that was over here. Have you been there's the microphone behind you.
Yes, thank you. I am Ricardo García Mira. I'm the coordinator of the Trances Consortium, looking at the social aspects of the energy transition. And we are part of the cluster of Just Transition, coordinated by the CINEA. So, well, a question that I would like to make to the panel, specifically to Mrs. Catherine Wendt from the European Commission, or for Marin as well, because his speech has a relation with this. Well, what we have explored, when we look at the social aspects, we saw that there are a lot of heterogeneities in the regions, in the coal and carbon regions. And these heterogeneities tell us that should be taken into account while making policies for these regions. I mean that one size fits all approach is not working. Because there are cultural, there are social, there are political aspects that are conditioning the different levels of implementation in all regions in Europe. So what do you think about these social aspects that have to be an important, a relevant part of the just transition if we take into account that every actor has a different concept of what just transition is? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll take those two questions first. So who would like to, let's take with the first one about participation and core users. Everyone is deciding who's going to discuss first. Florian.
I'll start with the last one because I think for me, it's more important. Also, the first one, I will try to answer as well. Well, the transformative process is requesting, or the need, in order to be a success, the diversity of the needs is quite huge. Meaning that you need to take into account that a municipality is not able, it doesn't have enough capacity in order to support this so profound transformative process. And this is why the Commission is doing good things from my perspective in order to increase technical assistance, in order to offer support. But it is not enough from my perspective. Why? Because we need to have a concrete approach, and we need to have a formal space for civil society, for all stakeholders, not necessarily civil society, in order to build that complementarity in a way in which is tailored. Why? Because if we will not do this, if we will not integrate those regions into supply chains, into regional supply chains, and we will not build the complementarity between those economies which we are trying to build and the others, well, we'll have some marginalized, some regions which will be marginalized. And the complementarity issue should be also taken into account. We have to admit that right now we have a setup of legislation. We're not sure how the risks will be in 5 years, because we are facing a lot of challenges from the geopolitical point of view, but also from the economical point of view. So we have the plans, which they are good for what we have right now, according to the strategic framework in which we are working, but we are not sure how the European Union will look like in 5 years, for example. So I think that in order to build that predictability, you need to have local support, you need to have local partnership, but also national partnership, in order to protect the transformative process. Otherwise, I'm coming from Romania. It is a lot of, we have a lot of challenges with the Russian input and in the fact that they are keen to influence the process. And now, and I'm saying this because we have to take into account the political factor. Because the political factor, from my perspective, and from what I'm seeing in Europe, well, is split. Some of them are very keen to promote this, are very keen to support this, I myself as well, but it is not the case in some member states. And it is, the concrete example is the rise of the populism in the EU, which is becoming more and more worrying. We'll see how the parliament will look like in the next mandate, but from my perspective, civil society, social partners should be deeply involved in the process from the formal point of view, which is not the case in some member states. And when I'm saying formal, in a formal way, well, in the monitoring committee, in the evaluation of the call for proposal, in the monitoring but control of the project, which is again, is not the case in many member states.
Thank you. Catherine, and then I see Tom, you want to come in as well.
No, thank you very much. I mean, it's an extremely important point, because there is, of course, one size doesn't fit all. And we're talking about the climate targets, which are, of course, at member state level. And what I was trying to say before is that we realise, and that's why we're here, that there's an impact at a regional level and a very different impact in different regions. And of course, the territorial just transition plans, the concept was that the plans are written for the very specific area, and this is something innovative in cohesion policy, that the plans, that the plans are working on very targeted areas which are affected, which have been identified as being particularly affected. And so the plans, the idea is that indeed they're recognizing the impact on that particular region, given its own circumstances. Florian did a very nice advertisement for all of the support which we're providing. Is it enough? I mean, how long is a piece of string? It's significant, I would say, and I think the Director General set out before, I won't repeat it, she said all of the different areas of support that we're giving, and we're going to increase it, and we have another session tomorrow about the technical assistance. Because for us this is really central, that we are able to intervene with individual regions to see what the specific problems are and to support you in the issues that you're facing.
Thank you. Yes, it certainly seems that, one size fits all is not the approach happening here. It's very much a based on the specificities of each region. Thomas?
One key challenge for policymakers, also in the case of energy poverty, is how do you engage with granularity? When it comes to energy poverty, if you allow me to extend your question not only on people who use coal, but also people who use oil for heating, we are talking about millions of Europeans. I mean, if it were a country, it would be more than Czechia and Slovakia and Hungary combined. What we are trying to do at the Institute for Climate Economics, and what we did for France, which is the country of the yellow vest, so we know a thing or two about the lack of social support and acceptance of the transition. We just published that study, which is just available in French for now, but will be soon available in English, where we look granularly at how many years of income does it take for different people in French society to be able to invest in deep renovation of a building, setting up a heat pump. And I think it's a good shift to stop speaking in euros and start speaking in years of income. For people who are paid as well as an EU civil servant, very few years of income. We're talking a month. For people that are struggling, we're talking about 4 years, 5 years of income. Even for just the middle class, the people that would be at the median wage. For people that are in the bottom 20%, so the two lowest deciles, the people that have less revenues in the French society, we're talking about, even with aid, about 8 years, sometimes 15 years of income to be invested to renovate her home, switch to electricity for mobility, install a heat pump instead of the oil or the coal heating system. So that's the policy challenge. One concrete action that you guys can do is to do the same approach for your region. For the 10% or 20% people poorest in your region, how many years of income does it take? And then you can compare with the aid that is offered by the EU, the national, the regional level, and see what you can do better. And what we found in our study for France is that actually from a strictly economics perspective, the French state tends to give too much aid to the wealthier people and too little aid for the lower middle class. So very happy to engage with you after this panel, but I think it's useful to do that analysis at the granular level, region by region, and then to find concrete, tailor-made solutions to ensure each family can find its place in the transition.
Thank you. Very interesting. So even more specific, not just even further away from the one-size-fits-all. Joanna, we're going to have to be really quick because we've got questions online and unbelievably, we're almost at the end of our session. So very, very quickly.
Yes, I just wanted to address this question, and thank you very much for raising this point on energy poverty. That's a super, super important aspect of the just transition, and very much also touches upon the what we are talking here in the panel of the involvement of civil society organizations, but also the whole range of different stakeholders. What I wanted to say here is that the TJTPs themselves, they're more broad, let's say, vision of how the transition of the region should look like. But when it comes to those like nitty-gritty specific topics, such as addressing, alleviating energy poverty, here I again want to underline the absolutely crucial role of monitoring committees and managing authorities. So the fact how properly also the selection criteria should be created and drafted to pick those projects that really are addressed to challenges of specific regions, because every single region has different challenges. And talking about Eastern Europe, we have an enormous problem of energy poverty. So we really want to be sure that those projects that are implemented and supported by the JTF also will tackle this issue. And another thing is also combining this fund with other existing, of course, funding opportunities. So there was mentioned the Social Climate Fund. So that's another opportunity, even though maybe the fund is not that big as for challenges, but there's an important role of it, and for the just transition regions as well. So I would underline this point.
Joanna, Florian, you wanted one sentence, yes? Only one.
Just to answer to your question, I think that how we are approaching different interests in the implementation of the plans, it is hugely important to be balanced, because what we are seeing, some vulnerable groups are not taking on board. And from analyzing the plans, we can see that some interests are more important than others. Why? Because not all the interests are taking on board, and the process is not balanced. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Margarita, please give us the voice from the people online. What are they asking?
Yes, thank you. There is a question for the mayor of Velenje, asking if he can please elaborate on the statement that he made before, mentioning that the adequate social security of the miners was not being properly addressed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for these questions. Yes, in strategy is, of course, included inside of this strategy that we are going out of coal in 2033. And, of course, also the representative of this positive aspect included inside of the environmental. But what is the missing inside of these strategies is that this social part. So the miners don't have any social security. What will happen with them when the mine closed down? And this is, of course, put a lot of negative energy inside of our region. Okay, but we said that we as a mayor and also the local community will start to communicate also with the state in this way that the miners will get some insurance that they could, I don't know, retrying his jobs, they could they could have to social work, and this is the most important for us. And the other way, we are not, of course, doing this restructuring only for create new jobs. We know we must restructuring also our mind. We must make a transition also in our public services. And if we make or we are going in this way, this means that all the people can trust in this process. And if the people will start trust in this process, then you can be successful in this process. And also the miners is, of course, included in this process. So this is for us very important, and this is also the reason why I started 3 years ago with the generations forums when this is the forum where we target groups invite, and we are talking about the challenges across this restructuring period, and with the different people, also with the youth people, elder people, miners. We are talking about education, we are talking with businesses, and I think that this is the best way. And also one time per year, we organize the international conference, Welcome Future, where we are also talking about these themes.
Thank you very much. And just so you know, in case you don't, and why should you, that Belenie has managed to achieve two important prestigious titles. It's become one of the EU's 100 climate-neutral cities, and has also earned the status as a kind of mini green capital of Europe, winning the European Green Leaf Award for 2024. So this is very encouraging for a coal mining town to be able to actually be at the forefront of this. So I think we should actually give them a big... Okay, I'm afraid we have now come to the end of this session. I have a couple of things that I just want to go through with you. Things that have struck me that have come out is the need to change minds, as we've just heard, the need to change the narrative, the need to accelerate, the need to anticipate. So there are quite a few things that we need to do. What I would like to do is just do a quick final two polls, so get your Slidos out quickly in your mobile phones. I want to ask you, poll 7, do you think we're currently on track to ensure a just transition for all? Do you think we're on track? And you've got yes, no, too early to say, and don't know. That's quite easy, so I'm just going to let that keep running for a moment. No, okay. I'm not going to judge the outcome on only 25 votes. Let's see what it is. Obviously, these polls are not scientific, but it's just to kind of get the feeling as to where you are and where you feel that we are in this process right now. Still too early to say. I thought that might be the case. That might be a winning one. But I was hoping that yes would be number 2, right? Are you going to start voting, Thomas? Try it. Okay, well, just keep voting on this for a second. I'm going to leave that going. And while you're voting, just a reminder of the upcoming schedule. For those of you here, there'll be a lunch break in the room next door. For people at home, you can have a nice screen break, and we'll be coming back at 1:30. This is then going to be followed by a session on the Just Transition Mechanism implementation for practitioners. We'll be hearing some stories from different regions. After that, at 3 o'clock, a very important moment. We have the honor of hosting the European Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms. She's going to be giving us a keynote speech, and then there's going to be plenty of time for your questions, much more than just now. So please start thinking about them over lunch. For those of you who are online, you could already even start thinking about them and sending them in on the platform at 3 o'clock. And I think now we've had 110 people voting. I think we can now stop this poll and say thank you very much. It's too early to say. Yes, we say we're not on track. Well, maybe you can start discussing why we're not on track and what can help us to get there. The Commission is certainly here and interested to see what it can do to help you. And so the only thing left to do now is to thank our fantastic speakers in the usual way and see you all back at 1:30. Thank you.